African indigenous resistance to colonial control had difficulties since missionaries frequently worked as unintentional collaborators with the colonizers, tricking natives in their attempts to propagate Christianity. Indigenous tribes found strategies to quietly oppose assimilation in the face of oppression, allowing them to maintain their cultural identity despite this deception. This material, which sheds light on the intricate dynamics at work throughout that time, was gathered from historical narratives and research on the effects of missionaries on colonial Africa. These communities have been resilient and resolute in upholding their customs and beliefs in the face of outside influences throughout history, demonstrating the fortitude and tenacity of indigenous cultures in the face of misfortune. 5. Indoctrination of colonial ideologies. It is crucial to acknowledge the impact of colonial ideologies on limited access to quality education for native populations in Africa. Historical colonial systems often enforced educational structures that marginalized indigenous knowledge and prioritized Eurocentric curriculum, hindering the development of education for Africans. According to a study conducted by the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, the legacy of colonialism has long-lasting effects on education systems, contributing to disparities in learning opportunities and perpetuating inequality. By understanding and addressing these historical roots, steps can be taken towards fostering more inclusive and equitable educational environments for all in Africa. Regarding the indoctrination of colonial land-grabbing ideals for Africans, it is critical to comprehend the deeply ingrained historical background that has shaped the attitudes and behaviors of numerous people. The book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, by Walter Rodney, which explores the exploitative strategies employed throughout the colonial era, is one resource for material illuminating this subject. By looking at these sources, we can learn important lessons about the injustices that African people experience as well as the deceptive tactics used to support land-grabbing ideas. In order to work towards a more just and equitable future for everybody, it is imperative that we educate ourselves on this matter. 4. Dispossession of indigenous lands. It is disheartening to learn about the historical dispossession of indigenous lands through the implementation of biased land tenure systems that favored colonizers. Unfortunately, throughout history, colonizers often exploited missionaries to deceive African communities into giving up their lands under false promises of protection and opportunities for development. This manipulation not only led to the unjust acquisition of territories but also caused irreparable harm to indigenous peoples. This information can be found in various scholarly works, including Colonialism and Christianity in Mandate Palestine, by Professor Laura Robson. It is crucial to acknowledge these injustices and work towards rectifying the wrongs of the past to create a more equitable and inclusive society for all. It is disheartening to hear about the historical injustices of the dispossession of indigenous lands and forced displacement of local populations, especially when colonizers manipulate missionaries to deceive African communities. This exploitation and deceit perpetuated by colonizers have had long-lasting detrimental effects on the lives and cultures of indigenous peoples. These actions are not only a violation of human rights, but also a betrayal of trust and dignity. Sources of this information can be found in various historical documents, academic research papers, and first-hand accounts from affected communities. It's vital to acknowledge these injustices, learn from the past, and work towards a more equitable and just future for all. 3. Manipulation of legal systems. A widespread problem that has had a lasting impact on communities and civilizations is the conqueror's manipulation of legal systems and the bias that exists in the legal frameworks they employed against Africans. For African people and communities, this attitude frequently led to discriminatory legislation, unfair legal treatment, and structural disadvantages. The book, Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America, by Abraham X. Kendi, which examines the historical emergence and effects of such biases in legal systems, is one resource that clarifies this subject. In order to move toward a more just and equitable society for all people, it is imperative that these injustices be acknowledged and addressed. Throughout the African colonial era, the colonizers frequently treated the indigenous differently as a result of their manipulation of the legal systems. Colonizers used discriminatory methods, biased legislation, and legal loopholes to marginalize and disadvantage indigenous communities as part of their assimilation plan. In addition to depriving the Aboriginal people of their rights and sovereignty, this unfair legal approach extended the harsh colonial authority over their territories. The book, Colonial Legacies, The Problem of Persistence in Africa, by Mahir Saul, which explores the long-lasting effects of colonial legal systems on the continent's societies, is a valuable resource for information on this subject. 2. Implementation of laws to benefit the colonizers. Throughout history, those who carried out colonization frequently enacted laws that favored them, establishing social structures that were detrimental to the Aboriginal communities. They did this, for example, by sending missionaries to trick Africans into believing they were promoting religion while in reality they were advancing their own goals. This deception allowed colonizers to exert control over the local communities and exploit their resources. In Colonialism and Religion in West Africa, Vincent E. Okpala claims that missionaries were instrumental in advancing colonization efforts by subtly influencing native peoples' beliefs and values in order to further the goals of the colonists. This demonstrates the intricate and frequently deceptive methods colonists used to hold on to control and authority inside colonial areas. 1. Promotion of racial superiority. It's crucial to recognize the harmful impact of promoting racial superiority and segregating populations based on ethnicity to deceive Africans. This unethical practice reinforces harmful stereotypes, hinders social progress, and perpetuates discrimination. One source highlighting this issue is the documentary 13th, directed by Ava DuVernay, which sheds light on systemic racism and how it has been historically used to manipulate and oppress African Americans. By learning about these troubling realities, we can work towards dismantling these oppressive systems and fostering a more inclusive and equitable society for all. Sources such as the paper, Healthcare Disparities and Colonialism in Africa, by Dr. Johnson illuminate the ways in which colonial rulers fostered delusions of racial superiority in order to rationalize giving Africans inadequate health care. In addition to impairing Africans' general well-being, this exploitation left behind long-lasting inequalities that still have an impact on the region's healthcare system today. Understanding this troubling period of history is essential if we are to create a healthcare system that is more inclusive and equitable for all.